Welcome to the first lecture of Python for Absolute Beginners. In this video, we'll learn about variables, data types, user input, and how to display things using the print command. So I'm in the Visual Studio Code, and first of all, we'll learn about variables. So variables are like boxes where you can store stuff. You also studied in algebra about variables in mathematics. For example, if I say x is equal to 1, y is equal to 5. Now here the value 1 is stored in the variable x and the value 5 is stored in the variable y. So why we use variables? We use variables so that we can use them uh, later in our code. So here I am in the Visual Studio Code, and first of all we learn about variables. So what are variables? Variables are basically like boxes where you can store some stuff to be used later in your code. We have also studied about variables in mathematics in algebra. For example, if I say x is equal to 1 and y is equal to 5, so it's just like mathematics. 1 is stored in the variable x and the value of 5 is stored in the variable y. And we can use these variables later in our code, right? So we can not only use integers or numbers to be stored in the variable, but we can also use some letters or something in English. For example, I say name is equal to Shamir. So now the word which is composed of English alphabet Shamir is stored in the variable name. Now you have noticed I have put double quotations around the word Shamir. Why is that? Because whenever you write something in English in Python and it is not a variable, you have to use double quotations or else Python will give you error. Let's just remove the double quotations and see what happens. So you can see when I run the code, it gave me an error. So what does the error say? It says name Shamir is not defined. So why did this happen? This is because we removed the quotations from the word Shamir. Now the word Shamir is not an English letter. Now it is a variable. And in order to use a variable later in the code, you first have to define it. Let me explain it in with another example. For example, I say y is equal to x. Now when I will run the code, it will say name x is not defined. Okay. But if I go ahead above the code where I have written y is equal to x and I write x is equal to 1. Now I have defined x, and when I run this code now, it does not give me any error. So one thing you might have noticed that when I run the code, although it did not give me any error, but it did not print anything out. This is because we did not use the print command. In order to get an output, you have to use the print command and specify what you need in the output. For example, I say print y. Now it will print out the value of y for me. It will give the output 1 because I have saved the value of 1 in x and then y is equal to x. That means the value of y is equal to 1. So it printed out 1. But if I did not use the print command, it will not print out anything. Now, let's get back to the previous code of name is equal to. Now, all the English letters that you write in Python, they are called strings. Anything that you write in double quotations, in other words, is string. Like for example, here this Shamir is a string. I can also write something in the form of numbers and it will be called as integer. Okay, like 21, it is an integer in Python language. I can also write something in decimal, and it will be called as float in Python. For example, I say pi is equal to 3.14. It is a float. And I can also give the value of true or false to a variable, and those are called booleans. For example, I say is a medical student, and I say true, right? Now, this one here, let me write it. It is called string. Now, you may have noted I have used a hash before writing string. When you use hash before something, it is for the human user. It is not for Python. Python will ignore it. It's just for the human reader, for to let him know what is happening here in the code. When you will write large pieces of codes, even you will forget what particular piece of code was for what purpose. So in order to remember what part of the code is for what purpose, we use these hashtags. These are called comments. So we use these comments so that we may remember what a particular part of our code does in the very long code that we have written. So let me write here integer, and this one is float, and this one is boolean. Now you will have noticed that I did not use a space in writing is a medical student, because if you use a space in naming a variable, you will get an error. For example, let me show you. I use space, and when I run the code, it says invalid syntax. So you cannot put space in a variable name. So it is written like this. Now let's assume I write something like this. And now Python has no issue with it. You can name anything a variable. You can name a variable anything you want. But for a human reader, such names are very difficult. And in contrast, these names like name, age, pi, these are very easy to understand for human beings. So Python does not care whether you name it this or this, it is absolutely the same for Python. But for human ease, we name variables such that we can understand them. For example, name, I can understand what is the purpose of this variable. With age, I can understand what is the purpose of this variable, what this variable really is, and it is very easy for me to understand. In the on the contrary, if I name like this all these variables, it would be very difficult for me to understand what a particular variable is for. That is why we name them in such a way that it is human friendly. Python doesn't care what's the name of the variable. So in order to know the data type of a variable, we use the type command. Why is it important to know the data type of a variable? You will know that at the end of this video. Right now, I'll show you how you can determine what is the data type of a particular variable. So the command here is type, and you will put in the name of the variable that you need to know about. For example, I have put in the variable name here. But remember, if I run this code right now, it will not print out anything. Why? Because I have not defined what I need in the print statement. Until and unless I use the print statement, I will not get any output. Now, if I run this code, I will get the output, and here it says class str. So, what does this mean, class str? It basically means it is a string. Str means string. Let's put in the variable age. Now, if I run this code, it will say class int. Similarly, I can use it for any of these variables. Now you can use the variables to print out many interesting statements. For example, I can print out uh, my name is, now I'll put the variable. name and run it. So you can see it run and it says my name is Shamir. Now I will say print I sorry I have to use this. I am now age years old. Now it says my name is Shamir and 21 years old. So you can uh, print out amazing stuff like this using the print command. Now let's move on to how to get the input from the user. For that, you need the input command. Let's remove this part of the code and say username, sorry, we need underscore, username is equal to, we'll use input, and whatever we'll put in this input command, the user will, it will be shown to the user in the output. Let's say, what is your name? And let's print it out. Now it is asking me what is your name, and you can see here I can type the input what the user will give to the program. For example, I say Sarah, and now this Sarah will be saved in this variable username. But we don't know what is saved in this variable username because we did not print anything out. So in order to know what gets stored in this variable username, I will say print username. Now if I will say Sarah, it will print out Sarah because I said print username. Now the value that the user put in here will go to this variable username. And when we print out username, the value Sarah was stored in this username. And therefore, Sarah gets printed out. Let's put in some other name and let's say Shamik, and it printed out Shamik because the user printed out Shamik and it went to the variable username and it was stored in the variable username. And when I used the print command, it gave me the value of username which was Shamik, what the user printed in. Let me show you something really amazing. Let's say we want the user to put in two numbers and we want the sum of the two numbers. Let's say the first number is num1 and we say input, type the first number. Let's put a space here so that there is a space between the user's response and our question. And input, type the second number. You will get the sum of these two in the print num1 plus num2. And let's run this code. Let's type the first number, I say 12, type the second number, I say 13. Now you will see it has shown 1 to 1 through in the output, but the sum of these two numbers is 25. Why is that the case? This is because it considers them as two strings. Now let me show you this. I remove this part of the code and let's say there is another string and I say another name and I say it is Shahid. Okay. Now when I add these two variables, name plus another name, this is what gets printed out. So the string Shamir and the string Shahid, when they got added, they are joined together. That's what happened here because what the user types in is taken as a string, not an integer. So it is a string 12, not an integer 12, and it is a string 13, not an integer 13. Let me show you what I mean. If I type like this is an integer, and if I type like this is a string. And to make it more clear, Let's remove this part of the code and let's print out the type of num1. Let's run this code. Num1, I'm going for the 12, num2 13, and now it says class is string. So this number is a string, not an integer. This number also is a string, not an integer. So how can we add these two numbers? It's pretty simple. In order to convert a string into an integer, you'll use this integer and put the string that we want to convert into a number like this. Now, I want to show you something. If I run this code, I have not converted the second one into an integer. So the second one is a string, while the first num1 is the string and the, sorry. So the first number is an integer and the second number is a string, right? Because I did not convert the second string into an integer. When I try to run this, now there is an error, and it is says unsupported operand types for plus, int, and str. Now, what does this mean? It basically means you cannot add integer and a string. In order to add two things, either they both should be strings or they both should be integers. You cannot add an integer and a string. So I have to convert this one as well into an integer. And let's run this code again. I'll say 12, 13, and now it gives me 25. And now look at this. The type of the num1 is now integer. At first, when we did not convert it into an integer, its type was string. So it's very important when you are or else you will get something like this 1213, this one here. If I want to put in something like in points, I'll have to use float instead of integer. For example, I convert it into a float and this one into a float, and now I run it 12, 13. Now float is always in decimal points. So when I gave it 12, it converted into a float, and because it is 12, it will be written as 12.0. And adding these two floats now gave us 25.0. In integers, there are no points, so it is 25. While when we convert it into a float, it is 25.0. And it is important. Like for example, a user puts in 3.14, and you are using integer number. So it will obviously not give you the results you want. If the user is typing in something in the form of points, you have to use the float instead of int to convert the string into a float, or else it will be converted into an integer. So that is how you convert one data type into another. One thing I must clear here, that data type basically means string, integer, float, boolean. If I have not made it clear enough. So data type basically means string, integer, float, or boolean. What is the data type of a variable? For example, the data type of name is string. The data type of age is integer. Putting together all that you have learned into a mini challenge. Now, you have to write a program which asks the user for their name and age, and it will print something like this. I'll write it. Hi, Sarah, you you will turn 30 in 5 years. So you have to write a program that takes the user's name, and then it tells them how many years it will take them to turn 30. Now it will have to use some logic. You'll have to use logic in order to write this program, but it will help you learn a lot because programming is applying logic. and if you know how to apply logic, you'll do well. I have given you all the ingredients you need to write this program. You just need to calm down, sit on a cozy desk or anything, and just think logically how will you execute all that I have taught you in order to make a program that prints out something like this after taking the user's name and the user's age and telling them how many years it will take them to turn into 30. Let's recap what you have learned in this lecture. First of all, variables are used to store data. Secondly, there are different data types including strings, integers, floats, and boolean. Number three, print command is used to show output. Number four, input is used to take input, remember, in the form of string. And in order to use it in mathematical equations or as numbers, you have to convert them into integer, or if it is a number with some points like 3.14 or something, you'll have to use the float command. So that's all for today. I hope you learned a lot from this lecture. Uh, and if you have any query regarding anything, you can ask me down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this lecture.